Good evening, and welcome to the third webinar of the Industry Experience with SELISE webinar series. Today, we will learn how to get started and grow in UX career. I'm Nurjaman Faruqi, lecturer of the Department of Software Engineering of Daffodil International University, and I'm the moderator of this webinar today. We have Omar Mainuddin, Senior UX Designer of SELISE Creative, UX designer Moinul Hussain, Dipto of SELISE Creative, is with us today. Wise Islam from SELISE Creative team is also with us today. Actually, they are the main attraction of today's program. We are here to learn how to get started and grow in UX career from them. We are really happy to have Afshana Begum, Assistant Professor of the Department of Software Engineering of Daffodil International University with us, and the respected head of the Department of Software Engineering of Daffodil International University, Associate Professor Dr. Imran Mahmood, has honored us with his presence. I'd like to request Dr. Imran Mahmood to inaugurate today's webinar with his welcome speech.
Faruqi sir, and thank you the members from SELISE, and this is the third time, and we're very happy to have you. That a proper software engineering only industry people can teach. That's why we want to learn from the best, and of course you are one of the best in this country. About the I was very happy when I saw that this is about usability, user experience, UX, those kind of things, because when I did my master's in England, my master's was related to HCI, and I was working with digital spectacle for military. And on that time, actually, I worked with usability and UX. This changed a lot because I am talking about 2008. But on that time, they were very serious about the user experience. I know some theoretical method like system usability scale, system usability measurement, inventory. Then there are also some new, I cannot remember the name, QUIS, questionnaire for user interface satisfaction. Those kind of theoretical framework, theoretical questionnaire normally we use in our research. My students normally, when they develop a software, I always ask them to take a usability test so we can put it as a user acceptance testing in the documentation. So নতুন অনেক কিছুই শেখা যেত। হোপফুলি আমি এডিটার রেকর্ডিংটা দেখে নিব পরে, কারণ আমার এটা খুবই একটা ইন্টারেস্টিং একটা প্লেস যে সবাই আসলে প্রোগ্রামিং এ এত বেশি ফোকাস দ্যাট ইউজার এক্সপিরিয়েন্স যে দরকার এই জিনিসটা অনেক সময় মাথায় থাকে না। এবং স্পেশালি ভলান্টারি টেকনোলজি যেগুলো আছে ই কমার্স সাইট অ্যান্ড আদার্সের জন্য, যে ইউজার এক্সপিরিয়েন্স না থাকলে দে ক্যান লুজ দ্য কাস্টমার, দে ক্যান লুজ দ্য মার্কেট, আর একবার মার্কেট লুজ করলে দে ক্যানট এন্টার এগেইন। তো এই বিষয়গুলো আসলে স্টুডেন্টদের জানা খুবই দরকার। তো আমি স্টুডেন্টদের বলবো যে একটু মনোযোগ দিয়ে করেন, এবং ওনারা যেটা বলে সেটা শোনার পরে ভুলে গেলে হবে না। ট্রাই টু ইমপ্লিমেন্ট দোজ ইন ইউর ফাইনাল ইয়ার থিসিস অর প্রজেক্ট। উই অলসো হ্যাভ 2 project courses. Try to implement those things, and I am very happy to see the West by আমি ফার্স্টে দেখে বুঝি নাই, you are getting younger day by day. So আমি ফার্স্টে বুঝি না যে ওয়েস্ট ভাই এখানে আছেন। তো বাকি সবাইকে থ্যাংক ইউ এগেইন আমাদেরকে আপনাদের সাথে এই নলেজ শেয়ার করার জন্য। এন্ড ইন ফিউচার আই টোল্ড ইউ দ্যাট ইউ উইল বি পার্ট অফ আওয়ার কারিকুলাম ডেভেলপমেন্ট। আমরা কারিকুলাম অনেক ইমপ্রুভ করতেছি, এন্ড উই ওয়ান্ট টু লার্ন ফ্রম দ্য ইন্ডাস্ট্রি। সো ক্যারি অন, থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ। আই উইল লিভ সুন, সো টেক কেয়ার। আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
Thank you, Dr. Imran Mahmood, for his valuable speech. He highlighted the value and importance of UX design. It is time to start the main event of today's webinar. I would like to request the Team SELISE Creative to take the floor.
Right, thank you very much. Welcome to our presentation today. So, as you can see in the presentation right now, we have 4 main points or aspects of the user experience career that we will be talking about. So first, we will be talking about what UX design really is and why it's important, and some of the common misconceptions surrounding the field in terms of professional designations or career advancement. Second, we'll talk about getting started in the field. So first off, thinking about why you are going to pursue a career in UX. how can you start? There are many ways you can do that, and what to do if you are switching careers from one completely different or unrelated industry to UX. And the third point we will be talking about is user experience processes, everything to do with some of the principles we follow, processes and steps, and as well as the daily tasks and some of the basic steps. And finally, we will also talk about career advancement and the types of skills, not necessarily UX related, but any other skills that come into play. Because one of the common things we will be talking about in this presentation today is how UX as a career doesn't really have a formal track. It's something that you kind of either switch into or work yourself towards, like if you are in a related field. Okay, so to get started, so what is UX or user experience design? So there are a wide range of definitions, and one of the main focuses is just how the user actually interacts, right? Interacts with a product or a service, whether it's through software or even physical objects like doors or signage. Everything you interact with around you, whether it's physical or digital. Usability has an important factor to play in everything that you see and everything that functions around you. So one of my favorite definitions of user experience design is by this author, Steve Krug. When I was studying graphic design in the US, we had some web development courses that were electives. So one of the textbooks that we had was Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. And it really drives home a lot of things about, why you want to, like the title of the book says it all really, that don't make me think. Like whatever I'm going to do, however I'm going to use your product, if you make me think, that's not going to work for me. So UX is improving how useful, easy, pleasant, marketable, or addictive it is to use a product. So most of these are positive aspects. Some of these are more business driven or like in terms of engagement or user base driven. So addictive is one way he says it, but we can put a more positive spin and say reusable or something I can return to. Okay, so considering all these factors for the user, like we have encountered a lot of misconceptions when we are not just hiring people, but also when we are working ourselves. So some of these examples, I'm going to go through three main misconceptions. So one very important misconception that you will see very often if you are browsing through job sites or any kind of job application platform, you will see even some reputable companies internationally or nationally posting job titles regarding UI UX. So one of the misconceptions that arises from this is that UI and UX are interchangeable disciplines, right? But the truth about this is that UI and UX are misunderstood to have a greater focus on UI than on UX job functions. The reason why I say this is when you look at certain job posts, you will find that the job title is UI UX, but when you look at the job descriptions, most of these are centered on not just design, just strictly production design, but also UI design as a whole. Not so much in terms of using analytical skills or testing frameworks or research frameworks when it comes to the whole process. So going with that, UX design involves far more critical analysis, far more collaboration and communication than UI design, generally speaking. It's not like a UI designer doesn't communicate at all. Of course, they'll have to collaborate, but the depth of collaboration is not as deep as in UX. Okay, so the truth about UX and UI is that UX is equals to UI plus a whole lot more, right? I'm showing this in a rather playful way, but it's actually a lot more like this. So apologies if there are certain texts that are difficult to read, but if you look at this particular series of Venn diagrams over here, you will see that user experience design encompasses a great deal of disciplines and overlaps of disciplines, as you can see. And interaction design is a big chunk of user experience design, but then you will also see through all these overlaps, when it comes to overlapping with communication design and interaction design, you have user interface design. And you see that it's actually a very small part or a fraction of what you do as a UX user experience designer. Okay, so first misconception out of the way. Second misconception is that usability testing is optional. So this misconception arises because normally as creative professionals, one of the things that drives us is to really create things that are very pretty to look at, or they may make some sort of functional sense on the surface, but ultimately, when you focus on that, you're not really focusing on things like usability or empathizing with the user. So when you're not focusing on testing out your ideas, then you're not getting valuable feedback from the people who are going to use your product. Whether it is someone in a back office app or using a back office app, or whether it's someone using a rideshare app or a food ordering app. All these things have to be tested, validated, and iterated on, right? So this misconception is very common. The reality of this misconception actually is that it's not always prioritized. You don't have teams or stakeholders or organizations who really prioritize this. A lot of this I can attribute to lack of understanding of the field of people who are engaging in user experience design jobs. Number one. Number two would be um, not having enough of a budget to implement these kinds of things or methods. So a lot of the times what we can see is that you have a lot of R&D and a lot of budget going towards designing the tech stack or making sure the tech stack works properly with all the different modules and integrations. But ultimately, all the development aspects aside, when the user actually uses something and they are confused about what they want to do, if you don't have user testing, you will not know this until you produce something and then you get very, very dissatisfied customers or what have you. So you're running a real risk by not doing this. So usability testing, if we want to really go for it, you have to really engage in the learning of it, learning about all the different frameworks, methodologies, and all the different approaches is very important. Once you learn these things, preparing a usability testing framework is in the next priority. So gathering all the individuals who are going to be testing, making sure they're briefed properly, whether it's through documentation or any kind of guided process. And other responsibilities will include kind of following up on your findings, gathering the findings, organizing them, and presenting them in a meaningful way to not just internal stakeholders, but also external stakeholders, so that you can get them to buy into the process of usability testing. What happens is, once you get enough of a buy-in, you can perform these tests and really get more out of your product's users. Okay, so usability testing can be conducted in a wide variety of testing frameworks. Our host was mentioning some of his experiences with usability testing frameworks from early 2000s. So there are way too many really to consider, but a couple of examples I can give, the most common ones I can think of. In terms of implementation of testing, you have A/B testing. So let's say you have a checkout process for an ordering platform. But then whether you want to add a product to cart first and then adjust the quantity when you're viewing the cart, or whether you want to adjust the quantity first and then add to cart. These are things that you can test separately and validate. If people prefer doing one over the other, you always go for the one that is preferable. And then you have another more non-interaction based testing. It goes towards user research a lot, where it's called card sorting. So it's a simple process where you get a group of individuals together, you give them a problem statement, and based on their problem statement, they come up with their own ideas or aspects that they might feel is important. So you can maybe gather, let's say, close to 50 different ideas, whether they're unique or not. You can probably come across maybe 20 or 30 different unique ideas, but then getting all these ideas sorted and prioritized from the focus group can actually help you determine how you're going to develop your product, whether you're going to focus on one feature versus the other. Okay, so another misconception, sorry, not misconception really. So the time to work on usability testing is now. And of course, when you do so, if you can build a solid case in favor of your project, organization, or client, then you can really flex your usability testing muscles here. Okay, so one last misconception, which some of you who may know what user experience really is or have delved into it quite a bit, there might be a bit of disagreement, but this can also be something that we can get lost in. So as UX designers, if we're focused purely on the user and not on the product stakeholders' end goals as well, like the business side of things, then we run the risk of actually falling short of these business goals. So if we focus on pure user centricity versus business goals, then we can fall short of these business goals. And the thing we can do, the truth about this whole misconception is you can always balance user experience and strategy. So what that'll help you do is it'll help you improve the product's user base, and thereby, if you have any scope of monetizing features or functions, you can generate revenue, and you can reinvest that revenue, a chunk of that revenue, towards enhancements or further research and development and testing. And what that will help you do ultimately is it'll really help you stay in line with the big picture for your product in relation to emerging technologies, future users, and the business landscape, which is constantly changing due to emerging technologies, of course. And now we see this with frameworks like the crypto frameworks, cryptocurrencies, NFTs. So emerging technologies will have a huge part to play in the long run, and we always have to keep up with everything else around us. Okay. So all these important misconceptions aside, why is user experience important? So a product's UX has to fulfill the end user's desires and meet business goals while maintaining the product development lifecycle. So what I was talking about before is essentially the product development lifecycle. You plan how you're going to provide the solution. You fine tune all the requirements, talk to potential end users, gather all your findings, and then you go into wireframing. And then once you're done wireframing and confirming findings from that, you go into the design and implementation with the team, the development team. And this is something like I learned from a book called Product Design for the Web. It's by the founder of Etsy. I can't remember his name right now, but product development is continuous. It's not something that stops. And similarly, if we are to maintain that continuity, we also have to give the users that sense of continuity, that okay, I'm performing a set of functions, but my journey shouldn't just end there. There should be scope for me to do more, or explore other aspects of my solutions that I'm using. So, with all this being said, a product is at risk of failing when any of these aspects are not carefully planned, maintained, or invested in for the long run. So I may have a really, really good app idea, but it might meet some needs initially. But as more and more users get onboarded, more and more preferences are on the table. And once you get that user research, you can really get a sense of where your product can go from when you start. So going with the MVP approach, a minimum viable product, you can start with the most essential functions, and then anything that you find is a nice to have or something that can be an enhancement, you plan for that accordingly. And if you plan beforehand and your findings tell you otherwise, okay, maybe this is not something we need, then you can make informed decisions as to how your product will mature. Okay, so why would you want to pursue a career in UX? So there's a few personal criteria and career progression criteria that I've listed here. So if I talk about my own experience, I actually can tell you that my background is not fully related to user experience design. So I actually had two spells of undergrad. My first one was a bachelor's in science, biology major, psychology minor. And then I switched to another undergrad after I was done in graphic design or visual communication. And that's a little bit more related, of course, because you have to work a lot with visuals, typography, color, hierarchy, everything that's related to design principles in general. So this seemed like a natural progression for me because I was in the advertising industry for about 2.5 years. I gained a lot of experience really quick, learned a lot of production techniques, but ultimately I wanted to level up my skills from the business side of things, like understanding the business, empathizing with users, and really taking ownership and driving a solution, like product or whatever it is that a client is in need of or a problem that is in need of solving. Okay, so how can you start once your intentions are clear? Like, why do you want to do this, and how can I start? So, professional and academic background rarely matters, and there's this very interesting diagram from Career Foundry that I've included here, where it highlights that related experience and unrelated experience are almost even when it comes to user experience career backgrounds. So you will see in terms of related experience, the ones that are in the teal color are related, the ones that are grayed out are unrelated. But user experience, given that it is so ubiquitous across industries, if you have expertise in, let's say, the financial sector or capital market sector, you can actually go into user experience design for trading platforms or the like. So why is this possible actually? So one thing we can understand actually is that user experience design doesn't have a well-defined academic route. If anything, one of the best ways to learn is through your own research, and also if you have any kind of online course platforms, there are some really great courses out there that you can engage in and learn from, and even get certification. And of course, you can even engage with the user experience interaction design society or human factors international, and even get certified there. And in general, you have a lot of transferable skills from unrelated industries that can help you. You can't ever say that whatever you've learned before cannot come into play in some way, right? Now, in terms of approaches, we have learning more about UX design and following some of these key principles, hierarchy, consistency. These are things where you have to keep in mind certain patterns of user interfaces that people are used to, or that are industry standards. If we talk about Google material design being one, and then when it comes to confirmation, having confirmation steps or approaches that prevent users from creating errors or performing something that they don't want to do unintentionally. And then you have user control, where you give the user the ability to control things like the quantity of items I'm going to order, where am I going to ship, how am I going to pay. Having the ability to control and provide more options is very important for many platforms. And of course, last but not least, accessibility, where you have to consider the contrast of color, the context of color as well. So if you were to think of red being a warning color or a danger color, and green being a more positive color. And then, of course, you have to design for color blindness, and there are many tools available that help you verify that. Okay, and in terms of methods and processes, there are 4 key phases that I discussed before: research, design, testing, and then implementation. And when it comes to breaking into the UX design work in general, you have to think about, you can think of many examples, or let's say if you know someone who has a business idea and they started out with a website design or website on their own. But then, when you have a look, you see that you can identify certain problems, and then you can also help them understand and figure out ways forward to improve the experience for the user and, of course, the bottom line. Okay, and then, of course, I mentioned before taking courses, and then also volunteering your design skills is also a very good thing, because you know you don't have to really get paid for it, but the experience can be really good, and it can also be a good learning experience from when you see what you're working with, when you engage with the people who are providing the solutions as well as availing the solutions. Okay, and finally, the final thing that culminates with all this, the culmination of all this, which is your UX portfolio. You can showcase, we usually recommend people who are starting out to showcase a project rather than a small set of UI designs. So an observation during recruitment that I saw was a lot of starting out, or like entry-level designers who want to emerge in this field. They have profiles on Behance and Dribble, and there are some cases where they have like really properly defined case. They have the problem. They have they basically go into the process, right? Like how what kind of team members were involved, what my role was in this particular project. UX roles can be varied as well, whether you're testing or whether you're actually designing for production. Both of these come into play. And basically being able to tell a story rather than just making it a document, right? If you can tell a story about how you were thinking, how you framed your mind around the problem, then this is the best way to approach this. Okay, so is a switch to UX wise, right? So one thing I was looking at when it came to UX as a field was just remuneration in general, like earning ability. It's close to maybe 1.5 times to twice as much as a graphic designer at the entry level. Very experienced or seniors graphic designers or art directors do get similar high-end salaries, if not more, depending on the company you're working for. But user experience design is valued above the rest because of the fact there's so much coming into play. You don't just have to think about the app or the website you're designing, but you also have to think about the business as a whole, every touch point. So all these things come into play. Now, when you look beyond the salaries, switching to UX-centric companies, like switching from one career to another, can be daunting a bit. It can be tempting, but of course, there's a higher learning curve, and the learning opportunities will be great, but it won't be as widespread, because in larger companies you have much more defined roles. So if you were to work for a company that has a lack of UX maturity or design maturity, you can actually get greater ownership of the product and all the processes involved, as well as collaboration with stakeholders and more responsibilities, whether it's you designing your process or your actual solution, or delegating it to someone else, or working with other development teams to make sure everything turns out right in production. And last but not least, you have to be willing to learn, fail, learn again, and just persevere. There are so many challenges you face in this field that you really have to push yourself. And it starts out very daunting. I got very nervous when I started on my first project at SELISE, but SELISE has one of the best work learning environments I've experienced in a workplace. So learned a lot, and it improved my confidence a great deal. So that's it from my side. I will give the floor over to Deepto, so he will talk about some of the other skill sets involved.
Thank you, Omar bhai. Hello, I'm Dipto. I'm a UX designer at Celis. So there are a few factors to consider as being a UX designer. So a UX designer must meet the user's need. This means that whatever the user came to do using your product or your service, you must make sure that they're able to achieve their outcome. As an example, in an online food delivery service, for example, Food Panda, uh, the user has come to get food delivered within a certain time. So simply put, the first factor means that you deliver your user's need, which is delivering their food on time, and the person gets the food on time to their house. And the second factor is that your product and service should is easy to use and easy to learn. And going back to the Food Panda example, this means that your user would find it easy to browse and find the food they want and put in their address and specify the time and complete the order and make the order. And easy to learn is even if they never use this service before, they know exactly what to do, and it's just as easy as though as if they've done it 100 times. So I'm referring back to the book that Omar Bhai mentioned, Don't Make Me Think. So you have to make the user experience, the designer have to make the experience more easy to use and easy to learn. And the third factor is that the user should always have control and freedom in the process. In the Food Panda example, again, this means that the user might change their mind and or cancel the order. So they should have the control and freedom in the process. And the fourth one, the bonus factor that a experience designer needs to consider is surprise and delight. So in the same example, Food Panda example, when the user gets that's his or her food delivery, they might get a free voucher for their next order, or the delivery person might greet with a warm smile and saying thank you for using their service. Something that really makes them feel special and want to use that product or service. So there's this surprise and delight factor. And moving on to the next one, there are a few basic steps that a user experience designer needs to go through every day-to-day life, which is understanding, analyzing, ideate, validate, and iterate. So, understanding is about understanding the user needs, motivations, and goals. Analyzing is interpreting data and research into a clear direction. Ideate involves generating ideas and finding ways to solve user problems. And validate is the step where user experience designers test their new ideas with real people, real user, or real customers. And iterating is the stage where we go back and forth on the previous stages to develop, to improve and develop a product or service over time. So if I align this with experience designers in a daily task, so uh, a UX designer in the understand stage will conduct research and interviews to really dig in and understand the frustration and motivation in a user's behavior. And in the analyze stage, they formulate data, derive insights, and কিছু patterns আসে and trends আসে. And in the ideate stage, they will start turning those insights into concepts, and অন্যান্য টিমের সাথেও বসে আইডিয়া জেনারেট করা হয়। And in the validate stage, they will create prototypes to quickly test their ideas and run experiments with real users and customers. And iterate stage basically একটা মাইন্ডসেটের মতো, might have to go back to the previous stages, যেমন আমাদের অনেক সময় দেখা যায় যে আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড স্টেজ থেকে অ্যানালাইজ স্টেজে যাওয়ার পরে যে ডেটাগুলো আমরা পাই, দেখা যায় আমাদের আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিংটা আর একটু ব্রডার করা লাগতে পারে। তো উই মাইট হ্যাভ টু গো ব্যাক টু দি আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড স্টেজ। এমন অনেক সময় এমন হয় যে আইডিয়েট স্টেজে গিয়ে আমাদের, হ্যাঁ, উই জেনারেটেড ফিউ আইডিয়াস, বাট উই মাইট নিড মোর আইডিয়াস টু গেট আ ইমপ্রুভড সলিউশন। তখন আমাদের আরো দেখা যায় আইডিয়েট স্টেজ থেকে আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড স্টেজে ব্যাক অ্যান্ড ফোর্থ করতে হয়। সো এরকম মাল্টিপল ব্যাক অ্যান্ড ফোর্থের কারণে একটা ইমপ্রুভ সলিউশন পাওয়া যায়। সো মুভিং অন টু দ্য নেক্সট ওয়ান। সো ক্যারিয়ার অ্যাডভান্সমেন্টের কথা যদি বলি, হু ইজ সুইটেড ফর দিস রোল? সো নেক্সট, হ্যাঁ, সো এখানে তিনটা ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্সের কথা বলা আছে। হ্যাঁ, সো দ্য পার্সন হু লাইকস টু সলভ প্রবলেমস, হ্যাজ আ কিউরিয়াস মাইন্ড অ্যান্ড আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড পিপল। সো এই ফিউ ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স হচ্ছে, আমি যদি ওমর ভাইয়ের প্রিভিয়াস একটি ইয়েতে অ্যানালাইসিসে একটা পার্সেন্টেজ দেখানো হয়েছিল যে আনরিলেটেড এক্সপিরিয়েন্স মানুষজন ইউজার এক্সপিরিয়েন্সের ক্যারিয়ারে ইয়ে করছে, মাইগ্রেট করছে। সো দিজ আর দি কমন ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স যেটার কারণে মাইগ্রেট করতে পারছে। আমি যদি আমার নিজের এক্সাম্পল দিই, আমি ব্র্যাক ইউনিভার্সিটিতে বিবিএ করেছি, মার্কেটিং মেজর ছিল, অ্যান্ড নাও আই এম ইউএক্স ডিজাইনার। সো আমি এই ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স গুলো আমার মাথায় রেখেছিলাম এন্ড ওভাবে করে মাইগ্রেট করতে পেরেছি। সো দিস আর ফিউ কমন ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স। আমি যদি নেক্সট ইয়েতে যাই, সো ইউজার এক্সপিরিয়েন্স ডিজাইনার ওয়ার্ক উইথ এক্সটার্নাল স্টেক হোল্ডার্স। এখানে ক্লায়েন্ট হতে পারে, প্রজেক্ট ম্যানেজার হতে পারে, ইন্টারনাল স্টেক হোল্ডার হতে পারে, বিজনেস পিপল অ্যান্ড ডেভেলপার অ্যান্ড ডিজাইনারদের সাথে কাজ করতে হয়। And we work on conducting research. আমাদের অনেক রিসার্চ কন্ডাক্ট করতে হয়, ইন্টারভিউজ দিতে হয়, and running workshops, design sprint workshops নিতে হয় user experience ডিজাইনারদের, and idea workshop করতে হয়, and analyzing the data we get from those workshops, and running test, যেসব আইডিয়া জেনারেট করা হয় ওগুলো প্রোটোটাইপ বানিয়ে ওগুলোকে we run test and design presentation বানাতে হয় so that we can pitch our designs to our clients and our customers. And last one is there are a few skill sets of a UX designer যেগুলো থাকলে খুবই ভালো। There are more, so আমি কিছু নিয়ে বলবো। So a user experience designer needs to be a very good listener, and needs to be empathetic. So empathy, it's very important because um, uh, I mean, as a user experience designer, I might want to get deep into someone's mind, so that আমি ওই পার্সনটার, ওই কাস্টমারটা বা ইউজারটার প্রবলেম গুলো বা ফ্রাস্ট্রেশন গুলো ঠিক মতো বুঝতে পারি, আইডেন্টিফাই করতে পারি, and open mindedness রাখা, which is exploring new tools or opportunities so that পিছিয়ে না থাকতে হয়, and must love solving problems. এই ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক, এই স্কিল সেটটা থাকা দরকার, and ডিটেল ওরিয়েন্টেড থাকা উচিত, বিকজ সবকিছুরই যত আমি আইডিয়াস পাচ্ছি বা প্রবলেমস দেখছি, সবগুলো একটা পাজল পিস হিসেবে যদি চিন্তা করি, ইচ অ্যান্ড এভরি ডিটেল ম্যাটার্স। সো সবগুলো কানেক্ট করার এবিলিটি থাকাটা খুবই দরকার অ্যাজ অ্যান ইউজার এক্সপিরিয়েন্স ডিজাইনার। That's it from my part. If you have any question, please feel free to ask.
Before we actually proceed, I just want to add a couple of things to this particular point. So, from my experience, there's a tendency for some designers, from what I've seen, to really kind of hold on to their ideas. Like they come up with some ideas, interface. It might look very pretty, but then they might not have considered how is this going to be implemented. Who's the front end developer who is going to work with this, and how is it going to happen? Is it even possible? So having an open mind and being a good listener, and all these things come into play when it comes to this kind of collaboration, because you cannot actually design or develop in an island. You cannot isolate yourself from your team when you're doing this, because you can come up with an entire solution. You can spend anywhere from like a 1 week to a 2 week sprint designing these solutions, but it's not like I go through the entire sprint just designing and then delivering in the last day. I have to um, show progress, and based on the progress, if I'm heading in the right direction, based on the development side of things as well as the business goals, then you're on the right track. So um, having an open mind, being detail oriented, and being a good listener is like super important, because when you're working with different team members and stakeholders, especially when you're working with external stakeholders like clients or partners, whether they're technology partners or business partners, you have to really hear their side of the story or hear their side of the problem. Their users are facing a certain problem, and I'm losing business because of this. I need your help. So having an open mind is important, because I may come up with a solution, but ultimately, the solution has to stand on its own, or if there are certain aspects that aren't satisfactory to the solution provider that I'm designing for, then we'll have to be open to these things. If there are cases that you can make through testing that no, this approach is actually good and we have data to back it up, then you have to be detail oriented for that. You know, gather all the information, present it, and really have an open mind towards the responses you get. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So thank you so much for your time hearing us out. So any questions you have, we'll be taking them now.
We are now at the question and answer session. So far, we have received two questions from Shubro Ahmed. Shubro Ahmed wants to know, he wants to get some suggestion that from where he can learn UX and UI design. And his second question is, how can he improve the UX UI of a product?
Okay. So to answer your first question, there are actually many ways to learn. One thing I would recommend is going to specific interaction design. There's this interaction design website where they have a whole bunch of resources for free that you can look through. And it's really good reading, because it really gets you thinking about why user experience is important and what kind of situations you can face. And other things you can also do is you can look at certifications with Google. You can look at certifications through Udemy or any other course platform like Coursera. So these are things you can approach in your own time. If you have any, um, if you have any questions that your faculty members can help you out with, or if faculty members can help you get connected to some of these resources, you can also do that. So going with your second question,
I would like to add
including,
on the first question.
sure,
So
sure.
there is a cool trick I've learned, that how to get a free mentor. So basically, how do you get a free mentor in anything? So if you read their books, you get a free mentor, or if you follow them on social media. So a lot of people are really active on Instagram as a UX designer or product designer or service designer. So you guys can follow them on Behance, Dribble, or in Instagram. and check out their personal portfolios, and you can learn from them as well. So they give enough resources so that beginners can practice. So that's one tip.
And another thing you can also do is you can look for exercises. Since most of these functions are task based, if you can find a really good exercise or a project rubric that you can work with, then you can really test yourself out, see whether it's something you like, whether you're having trouble with something, and you can go back and figure out how to improve. Okay, so going with your second question, um, how to improve the UI and UX of a product, right? So before we even go into improvements, what we have to do is we have to really dig deep into the current state of things, and then you have to identify the problems. Like, where would there be a problem where there's a user can be confused as to what to do next? Where can there be problems with conversion? Like, why are my users not clicking on something? Why are they not buying the products that I'm selling, or why are they not engaging with me for services? So it comes down to all the little details, whether it's even from the wording that you're using in your website or your app, how well it informs the user, and you know whether they're confused or whether they understand, right? So the less the user has to think, the more affordance and guidance you can give them. That's one of the fundamental ways to improve it. But before you actually go into those improvements, you have to really dig deep, click through everything, interact with everything, and see where things break, where there's a lot of friction, and then proceed with the design. So that's that. That's your straight answer for that. Okay, so thank you for your question. We can take the next question.
Unmute, please, sir.
I'm extremely sorry for that. We have one more question from Miss Omrin. She wants to know what is the most important skill in UX design?
Okay, Omrin, thank you for your question. The most important skill in UX design, I would have to say, is empathy. Like, it's not just about empathizing or like really getting into the mind and feelings of your end user, but you also have to think about the people you're working with, because you alone cannot just come up with a solution and implement it unless you have those skill sets. If you do, that's great. But normally in these kinds of professions, you will be working in a team, whether it is a small team of maybe 3 or 4 people, or whether it's a large team of 25 to even, let's say, 40 or 50 people. So empathizing is very important, so that you can also manage expectations with your different team members and stakeholders, and also understand where they're coming from. So let's say I've come up with a really nice design, but then the developers might have trouble implementing it within the time frame. So, you empathize with them, you talk to them, you understand where they're actually coming from, you see how they work, you observe, and then once you get that understanding, you can realign your processes, you can realign your designs, and then you can proceed with development. So, empathy. If you cannot put yourself in other people's shoes, you will have a hard time. But this is something you can also learn. This is not something like this. There's another misconception that people who are really focused, they might not empathize. It might appear that they are incapable of empathizing, but it's actually something you practice. And the best way to practice that is through communication. Talk to people, learn more about what they do, learn more about the technology stacks that they work with, learn more about the front end frameworks that they work with, and how you can inform your designs based on that. So yeah, that's the answer in a nutshell.
We have an
Any other
interesting
questions?
question from Mushfiqur Abir. Moshfiqur Abi wants to know how does he handle, I mean, how can he handle negative feedback?
Yes. Okay. So, uh, negative feedback is actually not a bad thing. This is first thing you have to think of, because ultimately, when you're developing something, when you're at the ideation stage or when you're at the design stage, when you're testing your users, or whether you're showing your ideas to stakeholders, there is always scope for any kind of negative feedback. Sometimes it might be the case that whatever you've designed is completely not in line with what someone might want. So when Deepta was talking about the different phases and how we have to iterate, and iteration can occur at any stage. So it can occur at the ideation stage, it can occur at the research stage and learning stage. It can occur anywhere, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. So when I mentioned that you have to be willing to fail and then persevere, like you have to pick yourself up, you have to swallow your pride, keep an open mind, and actually um, just power through it, because that's ultimately what we have to do. We have to provide the best solution possible. And if there are pitfalls or negative feedback that you get, of course, the nature of the negative feedback you get is also important. If it is generally very vague, then that's when you have to go into further user research. What kind of questions am I going to ask? What kind of tasks am I going to ask my users to perform? So these are all the things that go into play when it comes to feedback. Feedback of any kind is not bad. Positive feedback is already always good, but I actually look forward to negative feedback, because I, as a designer, am never satisfied with what I do. And in the realm of product design, you actually can never be satisfied. If you are satisfied, then maybe there's something wrong, or maybe your company doesn't have enough of a budget. So these are all these things that come into play. So yeah, that's the answer to that. Deepto, do you have anything to say about this,
No, no.
feedback wise? Like, what are your experiences with negative feedback that you can talk about?
Well, নেগেটিভ ফিডব্যাক অ্যাকচুয়ালি এটা অ্যাকচুয়ালি নেগেটিভ ভাবে নেওয়ার মানে হয় নাই কখনো, মানে মানে ইনিশিয়ালি দেখা গেছে যে um, একটু it took me a while to learn this ইয়ে যে ফার্স্টে বোঝা যাচ্ছিল না যে অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমি হাউ ডু আই রিয়াক্ট টু দিস অর হাউ ডু আই কমিউনিকেট আফটার দিস ফিডব্যাক। হ্যাঁ, সো সো নেগেটিভ ফিডব্যাকের মধ্যেও দেখা যায় যে আর কিছু লার্নিং থাকে, যে হ্যাঁ ইমপ্রুভমেন্টের জায়গাগুলো আছে অ্যাকচুয়ালি, নাহলে অ্যাকচুয়ালি ফিডব্যাকগুলো আসতো না। সো এটা হয়তো কম হয় তো বেশি হয়, সো এটা ইটস আপ টু মি হাউ আই টেক ইট, যে আমি ওইটা থেকে কি লার্নিংটা বের করে আনতে পারি।
So, like negative feedback, failure, or setbacks, they're always an opportunity to learn. There may be times when you feel really overwhelmed, but it's always a good thing to step back, take a good look at, from a distance, what's going on. Talk to some of your other team members or stakeholders, like, okay, we got this feedback, but maybe we're not clear on what exactly you're looking for. So you have to really engage through questions, conversation, as well as presentations as well. So let's say you got feedback on a particular feature, and your external stakeholder, whether it's a partner or a client, they want to get back to you, or they want you to get back to them on a particular revision or revisit of that feature. So we can always plan these things and adjust. So negative feedback is actually kind of our bread and butter. Like, if we don't have it, we can't really work, or we can't really define the purpose, because the less feedback we get, the more isolated the product will be, and then you won't have enough users will get dissatisfied and they'll leave, and you'll be stuck with losses. So yeah, that's that actually.
We are getting a lot of other questions from the audience, but because of the
Okay.
shortage of the time, we can't respond to all of them. But one
Okay.
question that is being repeated over and over again, I think that we should
Yes.
respond to that. That is,
Yes.
what is the most challenging thing in UX design?
Okay. The most challenging thing, in terms of challenges, you will face a lot of different challenges, but one of the most important challenges you will face is expectation management. When you're thinking of how you understand your work process, how fast you work, or how fast you work in a particular skill versus another, you have to be able to have a good estimation of that and manage those expectations. When I started out, I had no idea what to expect. I was thrown into the deep end, and I had to find out the hard way. So I had to fail. I had to learn from my failures that, okay, maybe the approach I took isn't that good. So maybe I should give myself a bit of headroom. So one thing you can do to really help with that, let's say you were given a task that, by your initial estimates, will take you a full work week, let's say 5 days. Now, in those 5 days, am I going to work the entire 5 days and deliver in the last day? No, I'm not going to do that. So what I can do to prevent any kind of setback is, I can maybe work the first 3 days, show some progress, see if I'm heading in the right direction, and then finish the rest from feedback. Now, like I said, expectation management is challenging internally in terms of fulfilling your responsibilities. And expectation management externally is the most challenging because clients oftentimes they think they know what they want, or sometimes they don't even know what they want. They will turn to us to really come up with certain solutions. And when we come up with solutions, we also have to determine, based on their expectations, like a development time frame or project timeline, how much am I going to be able to provide them? So convincing them and managing their expectations on that front is really, really tough. But it's always good to have every single stakeholder on the same page with this, because if one stakeholder falls short in this regard in terms of like the expectations they have for themselves or from you, then you're going to face problems. But these can be overcome through more active and proactive collaboration. So yeah, it's a very good question. But there are so many other challenges you can face, actually. But expectation management is one of the most important, I feel.
We are almost at the end of our today's session.
Mhm.
Thank you, Omar Mainuddin. The explanation on misconception about UX and UI is simply outstanding. We have learned a lot from your well-organized lecture and excellent presentation. Thank you,
Thank you.
Moinul Hassan Deepto, for his crystal clear lecture on key factors and basic steps of UX. Your highlights on career in UX design motivated our audiences a lot. We define the success of graduates by how fast they can get a good job after graduation. Unlike most of the fields of studies, software engineering is different. It is directly related to the industry. There are hundreds of different career paths open to the software engineers, and UX design is an attractive one. How to get started with career in UX, how to thrive in this career field, this is exactly what we have learned today. And we have learned it from industry expert. If you want to have career in UX design, you know what to do. Thank you, Team Celis Creative, for such an interesting, interactive, and insightful webinar. Our students have got valuable career advice and guidance from you today, and we hope they will be able to prepare themselves for their career path. Now, we will have the closing remarks from Afsana Begum, Assistant Professor of the Department of Software Engineering of Daffodil International University.
Thank you, sir. Assalamu alaikum. Sir already introduced me. First, I would like to give my gratitude and appreciation to our honorable guest, Mr. Omar and Mr. Dipto from SELISE. It's been around 9 months we are working with SELISE. On 27th March, we started to work with SELISE. They are sharing their knowledge and industry experience with us. Probably you know it. This is our third webinar. In this webinar, we have learned about a very interesting topic, UX design. We have already learned about the career opportunity of this field. Actually, our main goal of constructing a MOU with SELISE was to learn current trends from industries, share knowledge and data for research, enhance our syllabus according to the industry needs, and create a working opportunity for our students in SELISE. Hope we are working in line. Hope our students have learned a lot from your experience. For my students, I would like to say try and fail. It will bring your success. So, best wishes for my beloved students. An honorable guest, thank you so much for giving us a portion from your valuable time. It was a super program and a very effective experience with you. Wish you all the best. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Sir, unmute please. Faruqi sir, unmute please.
Okay, extremely sorry for that. We hope our students will be able to prepare themselves for UX career path, and we hope SELISE creative team will organize more webinar like this. With these expectations in mind, we are closing our today's session. Thank you.
Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.